Hi, welcome to Tag Arcade. And in today's tutorial, we're going to have the enemies fire at the player and maybe destroy them too in the process. So if this tutorial helps you out, go to my website www.tagarcade.com and click on this nice button on the top right hand corner to show your support. So let's go ahead and go into Unity3D, and we're going to go ahead and create our first script, or not first script, well, first script in this tutorial, enemy fire. Once we do that, let's go ahead and open up this script. So what's going to happen is each of the enemy object has to be able to create a bullet in it. And once that bullet is created, it has to be able to shoot the player or travel downwards onto the screen. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to our enemy fire, and we're going to say public transform bullet prefab, and yeah, that should be good for now. So we hit file save, and let's go back into our Unity editor, and let's go ahead and create that bullet prefab. So we're gonna hit create prefab, and we're just gonna say I don't know, enemy bullet. Next, we're gonna take the bullet here, and we are going to duplicate that. The reason for this bullet is the player's bullet, so if we look at the script, the speed is going to be 20. So what 20 means is that the bullet's going to go up on the screen for 20 units per second. But for the enemy bullets, we need it to go in the opposite direction. We need the speed to be going downwards. So we're going to say negative 20. Next, we'll just rename this to enemy bullet. And we're going to drag this into our prefab. So now that we have made it into a prefab, we could actually delete this, and we'll go to our enemies. Go into our enemies, and let's just drag the enemy fire into here. Let's do it this way: enemy fire to enemy 1, 2, and 3. So if we go into here, we got to make sure that our bullet prefab is associated with enemy bullet. So enemy bullet 1, enemy 2. There you go. And now enemy 3. Yes. I messed up. Okay. So enemy 1, 2, and 3. Now that we have those set in place, we are going to instantiate these. So instantiate. Why is that in red? Instantiate. Bullet prefab. This dot transform dot position. So it's going to be at the same position as my enemy object with no rotation. So quaternion dot identity. Okay. I'm going to hit file save. And let's go ahead and play and make sure we get our bullets. And right now we're in play. We have our bullets. But where are our enemies? They're disappeared. So let's go ahead and debug this a little bit. So instead of this dot transform dot position, let's say vector3.0. So what this means is that I'm going to place all the bullets in the game world at 0, 0, 0. So let's hit play. And did I save? Let's see. Probably didn't save. Let's save. Hit play. Okay, and here's all my enemy objects. So when I put the bullet in the enemy object's disappeared, but when all these bullets are at 0, 0, 0, the enemies are there. So what happened? Where did all the enemies go? Well, the one thing that I completely forgot about is each of these bullet is tagged as bullet, so that if the bullet touches the enemy, it's going to destroy the enemy. So we have to make a new tag. And at this tag, we're going to add it and call this enemy bullets. Okay. And finally, let's call this enemy bullet. Do I save? Yeah, save. So now, let's go ahead and put this back. This dot transform dot position. File save. And hit play. Oh no! All my characters, all my enemies are floating off into space. That's weird. So what's going on? So it looks like when we added our bullets to the scene, they're colliding with the enemies, and when objects collide in space, since we have no gravity, things are sort of just floating off. So let's see what happens if we turn off a box collider and hit play. Yeah, everything is staying in put. So if we turn off the box collider on the enemy bullet, things are there, unmoving. But if we turn on the box collider, like physics are happening. Now that I think about it, what happens if the back row of enemies shoot down and they hit the front row of enemies? Well, the bullets are pretty much going to bounce off the back of the enemy, so it won't actually get to the players. So maybe that's not a good thing. But we do need a box collider though, because a box collider is needed in order to determine whether or not the bullet actually hits something, in our case, the player. So maybe there's another way. Well, one other way is saying is trigger. So when we set it as is trigger, we are still doing the detection between the bullet and the player, but the physics, I guess, stops. So you're not colliding with another object. So let's go ahead and say is trigger and check it off and hit play and see what happens. Okay, and there it is. Now what we have to do is we have to get the bullet component of the enemy bullet and say is fired equals true so that the bullet can move downwards. So let's go ahead and make that happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to do private, because we don't need any other script to access this. And this is going to be our bullet script, and we'll just call it bullet. So in order to get the bullet component of the bullet we just created, we have to give this object a name that we create. So let's see, let's call this transform, and I forgot the S in transform. Newly created enemy bullet equals. Okay. And now we say bullet equals newly created enemy bullet dot get component. And this is my bullet script. And let's just try, I don't know, bullet dot is fired equals true. File save, hit play, and see what happens. And I don't see anything happening actually. So let's go to our enemy bullets. The enemy bullets are here. They're just not moving. Weird. Let me see what happens if I click is fired. Okay, so it's going down toward the player. Although I don't see my bullet because my mesh renderer is off. So how about this? Let's go ahead and go to my enemy bullet. Let's turn on the mesh renderers. Hit play. Or sorry, let's turn on the mesh renderer. Hit play. Let's take a random bullet and say is fired. And there it goes. There's my bullet. Okay. So now why isn't our bullet playing when the script is created? So let's just make this public for testing purposes. Save it. Let's hit play. And see what happens. So when we look at our enemy, and go down to our enemy fire script, we see under bullet that we do have an instance of the bullets and it's referenced correctly. So that's good. Well, let's go ahead and make it private again. And instead of bullet is fired up here, we'll just delete that and put it down here in the update function. File save, hit play, and there goes our bullets. That's a lot of bullets. So all of our enemies fire the bullets at the same time. So I guess when we instantiate the object, the bullets, we can't reference it right away. We have to give it like a time delay, and then afterwards the bullet's gonna fire. But that's not good because once we created our bullet, we want the enemy to fire it right away. So let's go ahead and go to our enemy bullet. Let's say is fired equals true. So since we don't need to change that via script, let's go ahead and remove this stuff. So the only thing our script is doing is really creating just a bullet. So we'll do that. Do file save. We'll hit play, and what happens? And our enemy bullet once again is not moving whatsoever until I do that. Click is fired. So what is happening this time? So let's drag an enemy bullet back into the scene. It's over there. Is fired is true. So when you hit play, what happens? Is fired is becoming false when I start the game. So why is the bullet changing the variable to is fired equals to false? So let's double click on the bullet, and I see it right here. For the start, we said is fired equals to false because when we first created the bullet script, it was in regards to the player, and at the very start we didn't want the bullets to fire up onto the screen. But for our enemies, we actually do want it to be true. So we're just going to delete this conditional statement right here. And depending on what state it's in, whether it's the enemy bullet, we'll set that to true. Or if it's the player bullet, we'll set that to false. So we'll hit file save, which we did earlier. Hit play. And now, what happens? Okay, there goes all of our bullets. Wonderful. So we don't need this extra enemy bullets. Hit delete. Let's just play. Make sure everything looks good. The enemies just fired the bullets, and now I could fire my bullet. And so far, so good. Next, we want our enemies to fire at random time. So let's go ahead and go back to our script. And let's go ahead and delay when we're going to fire. So let's go ahead and say start. Coroutine. Delay enemy fire. Open close parentheses and close parentheses. So in order to delay a part of your script, you actually have to say start coroutine. And to create a new function, we're going to say private IEnumerator delay enemy fire. And now that we define delay enemy fire, this should be good. So I forgot my semicolon at the end. Now what we're going to do is we want to delay an enemy fire, and in this case we'll pick a number between 0 and 5. So what we're going to do is say int delay fire equals random dot value times 5. Okay, so what does this line do? Well, whenever we use a random value, it's going to pick a number between 0 and 1. Now the problem is we don't want the number between 0 and 1. We want a number between 0 and 5. So that's why we take this random value and multiply it by 5. So 0 times 5 is going to be 0, and 1 times 5 is actually going to be 5. So now the numbers that we're going to choose is not going to be from 1 to 0. Since we multiplied by 5, our random number is going to be anywhere between 0 and 5. Now what we want to do is we want to have our script to wait a set number of seconds before we fire. So we are going to go into Unity, go to our scripting references, and we're going to use a code called wait 4 seconds. And once you do that, we're going to scroll down to the part where we have this. Yield, return new, wait 4 seconds. So let's go back to our script and paste that in. This time instead of 5, we're going to say delay fire. And then we're going to start firing. So let's cut and paste this down here. So we'll do file save. We'll go back into Unity, hit play, and I'm doing an explicit conversion from float to int. So what I have to do is, for here, I have to typecast this. So a random number times value times 5 is going to create a float variable or a decimal point number. So now I got to typecast it. So I got to do parentheses, int, close parentheses, and around my random value, I got to put these in parentheses too. Open parentheses, close parentheses. So we'll do file save. We'll go back, hit play, and hopefully now all of our enemies will fire at random times. And they are. So we want our enemies to constantly fire at random times. So we're going to set this on a repeat. So as soon as I fire, I want to fire again. So what we're going to do is we're going to say public, actually not public, private, fire again. Private bool fire again. And right now I'll say fire again equals false. And at the end, after I fire, I'm going to say fire again equals true. And in my update function, I'm going to say if fire again and I'm going to start my coroutine to fire again. So copy, paste, and actually instead of me saying fire again equals false over here, I'm actually going to put it into my IEnumerator. So we have the enemy firing at random constantly. So let's hit play and make sure our enemy is firing at random times and that they're constantly firing at random times. And yeah, the enemies are firing constantly at me. Oh no! And right now, nothing's happening if I get hit. So let's go ahead and destroy the player. So we're going to go to our player controller and add some more script at the bottom. Since our bullet is a trigger, we have to go ahead and get the piece of code that says on trigger enter. So we're going to go to collider.onTrigger and copy the line of code that says void onTrigger enter collider other. So we'll copy that, go to our script, paste it in, and now when we say if other dot game object dot tag equals enemy bullet, we will destroy this dot game object. So since we're on the player controller, we are going to be destroying this game object or the player. So let's go ahead and go back to Unity, hit play, and now if we get hit by a bullet, we should get destroyed. And we do, we disappeared. Just for the heck of it, how about this? When we collide with an enemy, we should destroy the player as well. So let's go ahead and create a new tag. We'll just call this enemy. And we're going to tag each enemy as enemy. So now if we go back and we'll copy this one on collision enter, oops, and go to the player controller, and this time we're going to say if we collide with the enemy, we're also going to destroy ourselves. So for now, let's go ahead and not destroy ourselves when a bullet hits us. So if we hit play, if a bullet hits us, we don't get destroyed. Let's check that out. Yep, so we don't get destroyed. But if we touch an enemy, we get destroyed. Okay, wonderful. So let's go ahead and put that back. So now we get destroyed whether a bullet hits us or we touch an enemy. So hit file save, play this for one last time, and yeah, let's go ahead and touch an enemy unit. Oh, I died. And there you have it. If this tutorial helps you out, like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And until next time, have fun and keep on creating games.